Welcome to the Health Ranger Report here on Brighteon.tv. I'm Mike Adams, and today we're joined by a very special guest, John Bush. He is an expert in, homesteading, getting off the grid, decentralization, agriculture, liberty, and many other topics. He's got a new event coming up in Central Texas. It's called the Exit and Build Land Summit. And there are some amazing speakers at that event, some of whom I've interviewed before, such as Marjorie Wildcraft. We're going to be interviewing John Bush here today about his vision for how society can be structured in a way that respects individual liberty, self-sustenance, and also survival as well, because we're talking about the future of the human race. We're under assault right now from every possible vector. And if we're going to survive all of this, we're going to have to restructure the way that society works, especially around food and other similar topics. So we'll be back with John Bush and that interview right after this short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, folks. Mike Adams here, joined now by John Bush from the Exit and Build Land Summit. John, it's an honor to have you back on. We spoke many years ago, but it's great to see you again. I love what you're doing. Welcome to the show.
Right on. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, absolutely. So the website is exitandbuildlandsummit.com. Give us the dates and the location and just details about the event.
Sure. It's a 3-day event. It's taking place May 13th through the 15th. We have an in-person component, which I strongly encourage folks to check out. There's going to be upwards of 500 of us there, 500 freedom lovers in the same room. It's always really special. It's taking place in Bastrop, Texas at the Bastrop Convention Center. We also have an online component. In fact, people could watch day 1 and 2 absolutely for free. They register at the website for free. But if you want to join us in person or access day 3, which is going to have some immersive, in-depth workshops helping people come up with their own plans and strategies, then we have an immersion pass to do that. You also get the replays and all sorts of bonuses and stuff. But I'm really hoping as many people show up there in person because it's going to be a wonderful networking opportunity.
So talk to us about some of the speakers that you have, because you've really got an amazing lineup of just some of the top minds in all of this. Go ahead.
Sure. So really, we're trying to teach people tips, tactics, and strategies, but also to empower and inspire people. So we brought together one heck of a lineup of experts and doers, activists, entrepreneurs, homesteading experts, survival, all this stuff. So our headlining speaker is Joel Salatin. He'll be presenting on Sunday. He's a really cool guy.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate how much of a rebel he is, right? Because he's punctured into mainstream society, but he's about as pure as it gets when it comes to freedom. So we're super grateful to have him on board. My good friend Jack Spirko of the Survival Podcast, he's incredible. He's a homesteading expert, survival, and he goes really deep when it comes to agorism and like truly creating parallel institutions, which is another big aspect of the event. Marjorie Wildcraft, of course, she's great. She does a lot of really good work in the space. Michael Strong is going to teach us about alternative education. His wife, Magat Wade, is an expert on entrepreneurship. She's helping a lot of folks in Africa because entrepreneurship is a great vehicle for lifting people out of poverty. My good friend Derek Brose, he and I co-founded the Freedom Cell Network together. He's going to be talking about the work that
I know Derek. I interviewed him a few years back as well.
Yeah, he does great work.
Yeah.
Me and him work really well and kind of bounce off of each other and empower people. And I could bring some up as the interview goes on, but we have about 30 speakers, and all of them I think are bringing their own little unique angle to the table.
So what I really love about the speakers that you've assembled for this event, and what I love about what you're doing too, by the way, because I've kind of seen you over the years and heard your announcements and so on, is what you and these speakers represent is practical, hands-on solutions. This is not an academic exercise in theory. These are people who are doing things. They're growing food. They're getting off the grid. They're working on solutions, decentralize everything, decentralize finance, and so on. That's what I love about it, because we can't just stand around and talk about theories if we're going to restructure human society in a way that respects individual liberty and also is sustainable in the long run. We have to actually do it, and you're doing it, so good job, man.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's what the whole exit and build thing is all about. It's about exiting those institutions that we find unethical, that we find useless, that are literally trying to enslave us, and building the alternatives. And a lot of people, they kind of stop with the whole waking up, and then they go deep on the research and watch the documentaries, and then they feel like, I don't know, I guess shoving stuff down the throats of their family members and their friends is the thing to do. But There's a role for that. There's a place for that. But I strongly believe that there's enough of us that recognize what's going on, that value bodily autonomy, human freedom, that if we were simply to focus on building the world that we desire, that we deserve, I think we could experience liberty within our lifetime.
This is a very mature approach also because it's non-confrontational. And what you recognize, at least I gather this from your work, is that the old system is self-destructing anyway. You don't need to, pick up 1,000 AR-15 rifles and go to war. All you need to do is build your own system that works. The old system is collapsing. Is that kind of an accurate summary of the way you see things?
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of people want to smash the state or, go do paramilitary exercises and show up to the Capitol building or storm the Capitol or whatever. And I think the best thing that we could do is exit out of those systems by building the alternatives, create the alternatives where slowly by surely we've decoupled ourselves from the legacy systems. Now, whether they collapse or go away completely, I guess that remains to be seen, but I'd like to think strategically, how can we have a peaceful coexistence where the sovereigns of the world, we just start doing our own things. Maybe there's some overlap. Maybe if someone in our community harms somebody in the legacy state community or whatever, they end up in their courts or whatever. But essentially what we're aiming for is self-governance and getting back to the land, homesteading, getting out of the big cities is really going to help us to accelerate that plan.
So, of course, Native Americans have some limited version of their own self-governance, on the tribal lands and so on. And yet originally they were victims of the colonial march across America. Right, the original victims. But there are elements of what Native American communities are doing today that seem to resonate with what you just said, because they have their own system of law. Mm-hmm. So they have their own justice, they have their own culture, they have their own largely sustainable food systems, but they also interact with what you're calling the legacy systems, mm-hmm. perhaps a little too much when it comes to junk food, for example. Mm-hmm. I've seen Native Americans living off the white man's junk food, so to speak, and then they get diabetes, right? Cause and effect. But there are elements that we can learn from those communities, right?
Yeah, and the Amish as well. And
exactly,
there's,
yeah, good
examples
point.
Throughout history, American history and elsewhere, where communities, a lot of times it's religious, they have basically taken themselves out. Or, the Native American example, there's a lot of atrocities that took place there, and I guess it was some kind of strange compromise or whatever. But what I'm hoping is that we can examine the things that we need to have a functioning civilization. So there's some guidelines, some normalcy, some standards, right? Some regulation in the sense of making regular, not authoritarian control and coercion. Some sort of justice system, the tribal elders, or some sort of rules that we follow. Communication, emergency response, food, our own alternative healthcare systems, right? And so rather than spending a bunch of time going to try to get this guy elected or that guy elected, or protesting or showing up to the Parliament Square, which, I'm in solidarity with a lot of those movements, and the Canadian trucker thing, was so excited to see that, but it's okay, you got the town square occupied, now what, right? We want to encourage people to start building and providing for those common wants and needs on our own, so when the day comes that we have the numbers necessary to declare our independence, it makes it an easier transition, because for the longest time, we haven't even really been dependent on their system at all.
So you think there's coming a day where there's actually a declaration of independence of communities like the ones that you're talking about? You think there's a day coming like that? Where there's a declaration of sovereignty, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I have this, I appreciate the mature comment, because I've been doing this for 20 years. You've been doing this for a really long time too, and I've tried all these different things, and I protested. I got bills passed actually in the state legislature that I helped to author, and with the city council in Austin, Texas. And for the longest time, it seemed like we had these victories, but in reality, we were simply slowing the growth of tyranny. So I very heavily focused on strategies, specifically answering the question, how can we get from here to there? And I have this vision of what I call the Confederation of Freedom Cell communities. So the Freedom Cell Network is a group of over 33,000 freedom lovers all throughout the world that are solutions-oriented, working together on common goals. And my vision is to encourage, that's why I'm doing this event, to encourage people to exit the cities. It's already a lot of tyranny there, but now with all the COVID mandates and this whole technocracy and smart cities agenda, exit the cities to find greener pasture, freer pasture in the country. We get a bunch of people to do that. We get our own homesteads, and we also build intentional communities. There's going to be some, like Diana Leaf Christian's a leading expert on intentional community and alternative governance models. We start populating the country. We link up these communities, trade routes. This guy's got the tractor. These guys do the eggs over here. We pull our kids out of government school. We have our own homeschool cooperatives, right? And eventually, there's so many of us that have done this that whether it's like a written Declaration of Independence, which could be cool and kind of like a rallying cry, but we're able to kind of have that sovereignty without any shots fired, without having to ask for permission through some sort of law or some sort of ordinance getting passed. We've just decoupled ourselves. And another thing, a lot of people are like, well, that sounds like Waco, or how do you know this is going to happen or that's going to happen? I want us to be good members of civil society and to be integrated within the community and to go to the town functions and to be good business members that are providing employment for people, right? So it's not like we're the weird guys that are hiding out in the woods. It's like, oh, wow, those people actually benefit society. They add more value than they take away. So what's the harm in just leaving them alone?
Right.
That's how it plays out in my head, at least.
I get it. Well, but okay, so a skeptical question, though, is at some point, because the tyranny of these rogue governments that exist at the state level, at the national level, all over the world, these governments ultimately, they exert and project their force at the end of a gun, right? So especially under COVID or what may be the next pandemic, suppose they release something worse, and then they get very aggressive, and you know the CDC has these, quote, powers that they've self-granted to say, oh, well, that square city block, it's infected, they all go to the quarantine camps. So at some point, they're gonna come to your door with guns and say, you either come with us or you're under arrest, right? I mean, aren't those scenarios realistic to consider?
So that's why it's of critical importance that people vote with their feet and get out of the big cities and also exit political jurisdictions like Canada. You may have to flee or like literally enter the country illegally to leave Canada without a vaccine, or New York City or California, for example. And one thing that I noticed, it's all about mindset too. I'm a big believer in mindset, and this is going to be a big part of the event. There are a lot of people, in all honesty, I do think that this whole New World Order, this Great Reset, they're very powerful and very evil, and they're very advanced in their plans. But also the emperor wears no clothes, and they have a lot of weaknesses and a lot of chinks in their armor. And so I think that existing in a political jurisdiction where even the state government, for example, is bucking the COVID regime, like DeSantis in Florida or Abbott kind of half-heartedly in Texas. Being here, and when you're in Bastrop or when you're in a smaller town, a lot of the county commissioners and the sheriffs, they don't go along with it. So the thought of the CDC or some federal authorities coming and forcing things, I think if there's enough of us, again, that's where the strength in numbers comes in. I don't want to see an armed standoff because that would just result in a disaster. But if there's enough people that are peacefully resisting, and it's like, no, we're not going to follow your orders, and it's 200 people, 300, 500,000 people all saying no together.
You don't need the arms, right.
It's de facto freedom.
Right. Well said. So I love what you're saying, John, and I also think one of the things I love about what you're doing is how you've made food such a central part of this, because food can be weaponized, or food scarcity can be weaponized by the system, which people are going to experience that big time this year. And so food self-reliance is freedom right there. You have a tremendous amount of freedom that other people don't. Question to you on this, are you finding that now, because of what's happening with the fertilizer shortage and the food supply, the supply chain collapse, are you finding more support for your message now than in any previous year?
Well, after COVID really was the big difference. For example, the Freedom Cell Network, we had 1,000 people that are registered on our website, freedomcells.org. There was like 1,000 people. And then after COVID, now there's 33,000. So I think a lot of people, like we've been talking about this forever, the New World Order's coming, like we got to hold it off. We got to make sure this doesn't happen. And then COVID happened. It's like, holy crap, it's here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And not only we think that, but a lot of just kind of more normal mainstream type folks were kind of just shaken aback. And so COVID, like the bailouts and like 9/11, of course, really woke a lot of people up. So I think that's one key factor. And now you have a whole large number of people that are aware of what's going on in the world and are looking for answers and solutions. And so there's a lot more people that are receptive to the importance and understand the importance of growing your own food. That's like a foundational thing.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about a lot of stuff that we're advocating, in fact, 99.99% of it, if not all of it, it's not illegal, at least not yet. So now is the time now for people to prepare to build this infrastructure, to build these relationships and networks so that we can weather the storm should they really try to clamp down.
And I got to say, since I moved to Texas many years ago, growing food has been the single most rewarding activity. I mean, I grow food like crazy now. I use the non-circulating hydroponic grow bins, and then I harvest big fistfuls of that. It goes into my blender each morning into my smoothies.
Yeah.
And that's how I drink salads. But it's just so simple and so rewarding, and there's a sense of freedom. It's like,
Yep.
if they cut off the food supply, I know I'm not going to die of starvation. I mean, I might get tired of eating salad greens, but I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
Whereas a person living in a city has no options. They are tied to that system, and they can be driven into a FEMA camp or into a National Guard food handout truck line or something very easily.
Yeah, one of the strategies that I employ is to think really hard about how it is that they can control people and to determine what those weak spots are. So, for example, it was revealed recently that people that work for certain employers, their income, their job can be on the line unless they do a medical procedure that they don't want to do. Okay, well, what can we do about that? All right, maybe we should explore entrepreneurship. Maybe we should work with like-minded people that would never even dream of doing something like that. We learned that they're willing to lock people down, and like, you got to wear a mask in the grocery store, or there's even vaccine passports. You got to enter to go to the grocery store or wherever in certain parts of the world. So it's like, okay, well, now we need to be growing our own food. We need to be connected. We learned after the Canadian experience, which many of us already expected this to happen. I didn't know it'd be that fast, even before the central bank digital currencies, that they're willing to shut people's bank accounts down for supporting a freedom
I
concept.
wanted to ask you about that.
Therefore, we should explore alternative currencies, cryptocurrencies, privacy coins that can't be shut down, non-custodial wallets, barter networks. I'm a big advocate for cryptocurrency, have been for a while, but it's not just cryptocurrency. It's not the be-all, end-all. We need to have those relationships and those local counter economies where we can connect with one another, do business with one another, and help to meet one another's common wants and needs through peaceful commerce.
Absolutely. And just to answer that, I was a skeptic of crypto until that situation happened in Canada. Now, I just did a podcast talking about Monero and why this is the privacy coin that I think fits the bill. But I agree with you. I see a place in the not so distant future where people are meeting up locally, buying and selling and trading food, perhaps ammunition, perhaps tools, and they're using a combination of crypto, silver coins, seeds, maybe some fiat if there's any value left in it, who knows? But it's going to be a combination of systems of value, and crypto has a role to play. If we've got a power grid functioning, if you could even have a regional blockchain that works. It doesn't have to be global.
Sure.
If you just have internet regionally, you can use a crypto-based system. So I agree with you. It has a very important role to play in decentralization.
Yeah, and I think the best function in a nightmare central bank digital currency, great reset environment is it will enable us to continue to do business with one another online, undetected. Not to mention, it's a way that folks that have developed some wealth and have wealth, they can put their wealth into cryptocurrency, and if they play their cards right, there's not a damn thing the government can do in order to take that wealth. And like with gold, for example, you got it in your safe. Obviously, you want to have physical gold, but you have it in your safe. That can be taken. The safe can be cracked. It can be broken into. But if you play your cards right and set a cryptocurrency wallet up correctly, you could memorize the seed phrase.
Yeah,
and that's
true.
it. It doesn't even exist anywhere except for some entries on a decentralized blockchain.
Well, right. And I think it's interesting because I've been digging into the privacy coins a lot recently, that even when Canada tried to ban, I think it was 34 Bitcoin wallets, I don't think they successfully banned those wallets. All they did was ban them from maybe the Canadian exchanges, and that was it. But you could transact outside that system, and Bitcoin's not even a privacy coin. I mean, think about the privacy coins. The governments are incapable, from what I can tell. I mean, the Treasury's put out, I think, a $600,000 reward for anybody who can crack Monero. And why do they do that? Because nobody's cracked Monero.
Yeah, they're afraid of it.
They're very afraid.
The big differentiator for folks, and there was a lot of misunderstanding going around about that, and the Canadian government tried to say they were all strong and powerful. So the big thing to be aware of for folks that may just be getting into cryptocurrency is you want to transact with crypto, store your crypto in a non-custodial wallet.
Absolutely.
That's
local.
a wallet where nobody has access to your private keys. The private key is kind of what unlocks access to the crypto on an address. So wallets that are hosted by Coinbase or PayPal, for example, or a Canadian exchange, the company that manages that exchange, they actually have access to the private key. Therefore, you don't even really own your money. And the government can pressure somebody. That's the beauty of this whole decentralized technology that's starting to come into play. There's no board of directors, there's no CEO, there's no shareholders to threaten or to sue. It's just complete, it's not owned by anyone, and at the same time, anyone can own it, which is super cool. So there's no pressure point. And so for folks that want to have that privacy and sovereignty over their money, it's critical that they set up a non-custodial wallet and get started that way.
And to your point, what we've seen over the last several years is the total corruption of the institutions that once pretended to be based on pillars of trust. So the system of medicine, let's say, conventional centralized Western medicine, long pretended, oh, we're here to serve you, or the drug companies.
Hippocratic oath.
Right, we're here to help the world heal. No, and it turns out, and people are figuring this out, you're here to murder us. You're here to prevent us from having access to ivermectin, for example.
Oh, that was so ugly.
Right. So what's happened, though, is they're shattering public faith in all of these institutions. Who trusts the FBI now? Who trusts the CDC? Who trusts the WHO? Who trusts elections, for that matter, right? Shattered across the board. So the time is ripe for people to seek decentralization solutions.
Yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity. And like I was saying earlier, it's all about mindset. So if you focus on the tyranny and whatever Klaus Schwab has to say, or Bill Gates did this, or Canada did that, then you'll experience more tyranny and more fear in your life. But if you focus on the opportunity that we have, focus on the fact that amazing conversations are taking place, focus on the fact that we have a decentralized global money system that allows us to transact with one another no matter what the government says about it. Focus on the fact that more people are starting to grow their own food, then that is the reality that you're experiencing. And for me, it's really motivating. And I feel blessed to be alive at this time in history because I think we could really shake things up.
Oh, yeah, you're right. And you grow quite a bit of your own food right now, correct?
Yeah, well, we just moved to our 10-acre homestead, and we had 3 garden beds in the back, and we did desolarization, where you lay like a big tarp to kind of kill the grass. And we learned that the whole garden section is actually over the septic drain field.
Oh, my.
So we have a pretty nice container garden stretching all across the front porch. But, it's a work in progress,
Yeah.
You just got to keep the ball moving forward and have a plan, have a path, right? But we're linked up with local farmers markets, and then through our Freedom Cell network, we have this meat share program where we all chip in, a cow gets butchered, and then we distribute the meat out. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know you had that program. I'd like to participate in that.
Let's roll.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned meat because there has been kind of, dare I say, like a hippie element or a vegan element in a lot of the homesteading and food sustainability thing. But I used to be a vegan for a few months. I was a vegetarian for a couple of years. But since moving to Texas, I am not, because when you're working outside, I mean, I got to have some meat every once in a while just to function. But, sustainable agriculture, animals have a very critical role to play in sustainable agriculture.
That's right.
It's very hard to live off vegetables alone. It's very hard to fertilize without animals on the ranch. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, they play a role for sure. That's something that Marjorie Wildcraft is always keen to point out.
That's right, and her rabbit hutches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I tried the vegan thing for a couple days, and then I got hungry and just that's a little joke I have. But I don't mind folks that are vegan. Like, by all means, more power to you. I do mind though. Sometimes there's like like it's a really aggressive veganism thing that's kind of like in your face, which is a little annoying. But no, I'm a big fan of meat, especially down in Texas. I think it's a great way to get your calories, and then the animals have a wonderful, harmonious relationship. Like we used to have 110 chickens back in the day on the homestead that we had back near Austin. That's where my kids were born, actually. It was a really cool place. We were renting the spot, so
Oh, wow.
no more renting homesteads. I strongly encourage people to buy the land that you're going to grow food on and raise a family on. But it was just such an abundant source of fertilizer for the food. It was always there, constantly there. And then we had the eggs, and we had the meat. So I'm a big fan of meat. But vegans want to do their thing. That's cool too.
No, I hear you. I mean, we respect people's individual choices, but we don't want them to push their religion, whether it's food religion or whatever, on anybody else. To each his own. But let's get back to some practical things about your summit that's coming up.
Sure.
And just to review, so do you still have tickets for people to visit in person?
We still have in-person tickets, although they're selling pretty quick. So I hope that we're going to sell out. I think that we will. So if folks want to join us, go ahead and make your travel plans and get yourself a ticket. There's less than 12 VIP tickets left too.
Oh, wow. Okay. And that's exitandbuildlandsummit.com.
Yes,
correct?
exitandbuildlandsummit.com.
And then people can also purchase a virtual presence or virtual attendance, right?
Yeah, if you go to the website, the first page, it'll tell you all about the event. It'll tell you about all the speakers. I forgot to mention earlier, Joel Skousen is speaking.
Oh, that's great, yeah.
He's going to do one of the Sunday workshops, which will really be a good opportunity to pick his brain if somebody has an idea on where they want to move. But you sign up and register for free on the homepage. Totally free, no cost. All we need is your email address. And then on the next page, we reveal the options to participate in person, which I highly, highly recommend. Or we have this virtual immersion pass where you'll get to access day 3, which is the in-depth workshops. You'll have opportunities to ask questions of some of the presenters. And you'll get lifetime access to the replay, and you get to download all the content as well.
Oh, wow, okay.
And then recently I did this workshop. It was a 2-day workshop. It's like 13 hours of content. It's called the Exit and Build Life Design Workshop. So this event's Exit and Build Land Summit. It's all about exiting the cities, building land, building community, and buying land in the country. But I did this workshop that was more about how can I design a life of purpose, a life of wealth and abundance, and a life of freedom. So we talked about pulling your kids out of government school. We talked about mindset. We talked about relationships, how to deal with people in your family that maybe don't get what's going on and how to maintain harmony there. We talked about alternatives to big tech. We talked about cryptocurrency and financial strategy. So that's included as a bonus, as is the replay of the first Land Summit. This is the second one we did. We did one in LaGrange, Texas, not on this scale, but that was back in November. So all sorts of great little goodies that folks get if they take advantage of that virtual pass.
Wow, okay. Very, very cool. And I'm going to invite you here publicly, to the extent that you are able to, please find segments that you could upload that would be free to the public, whatever your choice is. Let me know about it. We'll help publicize those on Brighteon and just kind of introduce people to some of this philosophy. Because I think more people are open to what you're doing right now than ever before, at least in our lifetimes.
Sure. Yeah, it really resonates with a lot of people because I lived in Austin my whole life, and it was great. It used to be kind of cool and weird and like a cool scene, but then it started getting very corporate, very California, and it was like left, and it was like a light progressive, but still kind of hip. But then recently it's gone very far, far left, like very nauseatingly left. And so I had to get in the traffic and the surveillance cameras all over. I had to get the heck out of the city. So I think a lot of people are beginning to recognize that there's a better way to do life. And one of the big foundations of one of the big changes that we can make is where we decide to live. And there's just so much opportunity when you get a piece of land.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially in a state like Texas that respects your rights to do things like catch water, right? Unlike Oregon,
Controversial.
Right. But in Texas, you can just build a pond, right? You don't have to ask for permission. You can collect your own runoff water because that's your water. I mean, this is a Texas understanding. I mean, actually, it should be a human understanding that if you own a piece of land, you can collect some water on that land. But Texas is a great place for all kinds of reasons. However, the property prices are insane right now, although perhaps they will settle. But what would you say to people who are having trouble affording land? And the same is true in many other states right now. Land prices are through the roof. There's probably quite a bubble underway right now. What would you say?
So in my work, my business is called Live Free Academy, and it's the business with the Central Texas Freedom Cell Network. We're the ones hosting the event. But in my work, I'm very conscious of people's barriers and limiting beliefs and obstacles. And so through the summit, we're going to try to break through a lot of those barriers and obstacles to clear the path for people to be successful in this pursuit. And one of the biggest obstacles that people have is not having the money to buy the land. And so for one, I just want to point out, they just printed $10 trillion.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money out there to be had. And in order to get your hands on that money, you have to help people to solve their problems. You have to provide value to other people. So oftentimes people are like, well, I don't have money, I can't do it. The thing to do is to follow up with the question, how can I get my hands on some money? And I think entrepreneurship is a wonderful tool for that. But on top of that, we're going to help people that are wanting to homestead and do the property by themselves or with their family. But we're also really going to dive deep when it comes to intentional communities or the cooperative purchasing of land. So let's say you have a $500,000, let's make it simpler. Let's say you have a $300,000 or $250,000 property, and all that it takes is 10% down. Well, that's $25,000. Bringing together 5 people, before you know it, you just need to pony up $5,000 apiece. And if you're seriously committed to it, you'll figure out a way to find that $5,000. And in some instances, it won't take as long as you think. So there's opportunities, and there still are other states in more rural areas. It's always the further that you get away from the city, the less the land costs, which is what we're going for here. So that actually plays to our benefit.
There's also a necessary reevaluation internally of what is value or what is wealth. So, we see more conventional people, they want to live in a big fancy McMansion, and they think that's a sign of wealth, and they want to drive a really fancy car, a sign of wealth. But then they have no food, reliability. Mm-hmm. And so they're subject to the problems at the grocery store or the contamination of the food supply or what have you. And I think, don't we have to reevaluate what is abundance and what is wealth? Because fiat is a joke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I had that lesson back with my ex-wife. We would travel around the country doing little freedom events and meetups. And it was shortly after the Ron Paul for 2008 president campaign, and we were tapped into this Ron Paul Revolution Network, right? And I think we met at a Nullify Now event for the first time.
I think so too, yeah.
Put on
exactly, 10th Amendment thing, yeah.
All this cool stuff grew out of the whole Ron Paul movement. But we were able to basically drive into any state in the country and post on social media, hey, we're looking for a place to stop overnight. Is there anyone that can put us up? We just got the car and a couple dogs. And we always had options. And for me, I realized this is really what wealth is all about, being connected, having a network. And for me, it just comes down to being able to fulfill your wants and needs with ease. That's what wealth means to me. And sure, having money most definitely helps in that pursuit, but it's not the be-all, end-all by any means. Growing your own food, having a warm connection with your kids, that's wealth and abundance for me. Having a community that's going to get your back or help lift you up in a time of crisis, to me, that's what's most important. And I think a lot of people are beginning to recognize that.
What do you think is going to happen to the fiat dollar in particular?
I think there's going to be a slow, this goes to the whole concept of crap hitting the fan, right? I started getting real conscious of that back in 2006. And I'd always tell my dad, you need to be prepared, Dad. Pull your money out of the stock market, get into silver and stuff. And something that really stuck with me, my dad said, John, let me do his voice. John, I could go up to the attic and get a book called How to Profit from the Upcoming Collapse, written in 1978. And that was kind of an aha for me. I realized it's all one big perpetual collapse. They're kicking the can down the road. But I think in reality what's going to happen is it's going to be a slow, soft, gradual transition to central bank digital currencies. And they're going to move away from the fiat system as we know it and implement this digital track and control surveillance system where they could turn off your ability to do commerce as well. And so I think that is in the not so distant future, and most central banks will adopt this practice. And so the thing for us to do now is to preemptively build the financial infrastructure and build the commercial connections so that we can continue doing business as usual as they transition to this slave surveillance system.
Well, and along those lines, let's talk about freedom of speech as well, because I know you and I both believe in decentralized control. So individuals being able to speak freely. Elon Musk has just, reportedly purchasing Twitter. But, I look at that and everybody praising Elon, and I'm like, well, okay, so now you have one guy in charge of what you can say, instead of a board of directors. What if the one guy makes the wrong decision, right? So not to say anything against Elon, it's awesome. Let's see what he does. Maybe he's going to do something great. But ultimately, shouldn't we have options that are far more decentralized than just relying on a few billionaires to make the right call?
Sure, and just on the Elon thing, I'm a fan of Elon. I don't agree with everything that he wants to do, right, by any means, but I do think that his heart is in the right place, and I think that he genuinely is trying to do things for the betterment of humanity. That's my view. I'm also inspired by his entrepreneurship and driving past the Gigafactory.
Oh yeah,
on
it is
130,
pretty impressive.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's really cool. He's doing some big things, and his work ethic is relentless. But nonetheless, I do think it'll be a positive benefit as far as Twitter. Twitter is a very popular space, and I'm already seeing Dr. Robert Malone's posting again. This guy named Max Egan, his account got restored apparently.
Really, Max Egan got restored.
Yeah, I don't know if it got restored, but there he posted "Hey, I'm back," and it was his account, because you could go back and see stuff that he was posting in 2021, I guess, before he got booted.
Well,
So
I just applied to Twitter today for reinstatement as well.
I feel confident that it's going to be a positive. But yes, you bring up a good point. Ultimately, the best thing that we need to do is build up the decentralized blockchain-based social media platforms.
Yes.
Like Odyssey, for example, is one that I'm a big fan of. It's the library blockchain. This creates an environment where it's censor resistant. You cannot censor it whatsoever. So I'm celebrating. I think it's a good thing, but at the same time, we should never put all our cards or all our eggs in one basket, or never fully just act. I don't do the hero thing. A lot of people were all excited about Trump, and I thought Trump did some cool things, but they just put all of their hope into this guy, and they abrogated the responsibility of securing their own freedom. So just the same, we can't stop here. We need to continue to grow, utilize, and promote these decentralized, censor-proof systems like Odyssey.
Right. It's almost like you're saying that, hey, while you're waiting for somebody to come along and save you, you could be saving yourself right now.
Yeah.
Well, what are you waiting for? Start growing food.
Yeah, it's just a place of empowerment. I think a lot of folks, even in our community and the broader freedom, truth movement, it's just there's a comfort in the victimhood or the blaming or the pointing of the finger, because to do otherwise means you have to take responsibility, and you got to take a good hard look in the mirror, and you got to get to work. And so, it's definitely harder to build a decentralized blockchain platform or start your own alternative social media network, but it's what needs to get done. And so I always applaud the folks that are out there doing it.
Yeah, it does take work, and I'm reminding myself of that every time I'm raking out the chicken house. Because we have about 50 hens too, a couple of roosters, and it's work, but every time I get a fresh egg omelet from those fresh backyard eggs, it's totally worth it every time.
Tastes totally different too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that, we have a lot of animals at our ranch. We've got goats and donkeys and dogs and chickens, and for the most part, they all get along. But it's nice to watch other living beings inhabit the space. Mm-hmm. Whereas, in a concrete jungle city, you're just surrounded by people, but they're eating the flesh of animals, but they've never seen the animals.
Yeah.
It comes from somewhere else. So they've exported the idea of slaughter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're disconnected from where it all comes from.
Yep, disconnected. That's the same thing with government in general. People, if the people that are voting for this law or that law had to go enforce the law themselves, then perhaps they'd have a shift in their perspective on it, because they just outsource it just the same. There's a disconnection between what it actually means to live in a government. There's coercion, like you brought up the gun earlier. That's really what it is.
Yeah. Okay, so next question for you. After this summit, this summit's going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of it, and I love the guests you have, but what's next for you? Are you going to do this summit every 6 months or every year? Or
yeah, it'll be an
what's your plan?
annual thing. So The last one, I guess, was 6 or 7 months away, but we'll probably make it because it's a lot of work.
It is,
We have an
yeah.
amazing team. I want to shout out my team and amazing volunteers as well. But we'll do the event again. But really, these events and these conferences, they're kind of, we're going to teach a lot of actual practical skills, but it's also kind of like a networking cheerleading thing to get everyone all pumped up. But where the real work takes place is when people go back home. And what I hope to do in my own work is to serve as the catalyst that connects the people, that helps to show people the way to work together outside of the scope of the big corporations and the big governments, and then eventually create this interconnected network of sovereign, independent communities. So that's what I'm aiming to do
And is that
in the off season.
freedomcells.org?
Yeah,
right?
freedomcells.org. It's been around since 2015, 2014. It was just an idea because I was learning about voluntarism and saw all these people value freedom. I'm like, okay, these people recognize that the government is fraudulent and that there's all this crazy conspiracy going on, but we're still obeying, or we're still paying taxes, we're still doing A, B, and C. So it's like, what's the missing element here? And I realized it's strength in numbers. We need as many people as possible to stand up and work together and unite. And not to stand up and fight or to stand up and vote, but to stand up and connect with one another and start helping one another fulfill our common wants and needs and solve these common goals. And so Derek Bros took the idea and spread it. It was just an idea that I had. And we had like one little group, but he started promoting the idea and really gave it wings, and it turned into this whole network. And like I said before, now we have over 33,000 people.
Well, that's extraordinary, and it also shows the evil genius of the COVID lockdowns, because that was about isolating people, trapping people in their own homes. You couldn't gather for church, you couldn't gather for school, you couldn't gather for any kind of meeting, in the lockdown jurisdictions. And look at what China's doing right now. Horrific lockdowns in Shanghai and coming to Beijing, over a few dozen positive cases out of 25 million people.
Yeah.
Well, that's completely insane. But the people of China, I mean, if they all chose to rise up, they could overthrow their communist regime, but it's too scary. They don't have a Second Amendment or anything like that. I mean, they're all trapped in their own homes now. They're slaves to the system.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I guess there was an attempt at that with Tiananmen Square, and that got shut down. I'd like to think that it's not too far gone, and there's still the light of human freedom, even in the most authoritarian of regimes. But what's important for folks that aren't in China is to see what's possible. Some people are like, well, that's in China. That's the Chinese Communist government. It's like, there's a lot of elements of the Chinese Communist government in this government and many other governments, especially all linked up with the DNC and stuff. So it just really underscores why it's important that we're doing the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, what about people in other countries who are trying to do something like what you're doing? Are you getting input of like freedom cells from many other nations around the world? What are people up to?
Yeah, there's freedom cells all over the world. There's a huge contingent in Mexico. That's
Really?
where Derek resides, and he just did a tour. He did an American tour and met with all these folks. I went on some of the stops, and then in the Mexico tour, surprisingly, there's just as many people as in the American tour. Mexicans, expats, Canadians, folks from Europe, because of course Mexico never required any testing or any vaccine at all for travel. There's a big contingent in Canada. There's a lot of folks in Australia, which we were very much in solidarity with during all their craziness. There was even a small group, because we have this map on the website, freedomcells.org. We don't encourage you to put your home address, but put like a park down the street or the coffee shop down the road. And then when you go put your address and you see like, wow, there's 12 people in my area. In fact, there's 2 people that are on my street that I met because we went to a meeting here in Bastrop.
You're kidding me.
Pretty cool, yeah. But at one point there was a dot on the map in North Korea, and then the dot disappeared. I'm just kidding. There wasn't a dot there. But no, it is a global network, and there's a lot of people.
That would be a courageous North Korean resident. Yeah.
Definitely don't want to put yourself on a map with that. What I'm encouraging folks that live in Canada, for example, or Australia, is as soon as humanly possible, as soon as the opportunity presents itself, get the hell out of there. I'm not one that feels like that's the whole exit and build thing. It started off as like a geographic thing. Do we hunker down or do we exit and build elsewhere? And so I'm not one to like, this is my homeland, my home country of Australia. We can turn this around. It's like sometimes there's no like it's not shameful to just go retreat and go somewhere else where there's more hope for freedom. That's my feelings, at least. Like, I would get the heck out of Canada if I was Canadian. I would get the heck out of Australia. Sometimes it's hard, though, because people have family, they have property, they have jobs or whatever. But it's just the New World Order has really shown their colors and what they're capable of.
Well, so true, but even speaking about California or cities in California, a friend of mine a year ago or so was saying, I'm going to stay in California, I'm going to stay on the front lines, we got to have people fighting for freedom here. And then 6 months ago, he's like, I'm out of California.
Put up an effort, but sometimes you can see when you're just outgunned and it just ain't going to happen.
Yeah, well, there's been so many people have come to Texas from California, even people prominent in the health freedom movement, like Del Bigtree, for example, or Mickey Willis. It was like, this is impossible here in California because the tyranny is so insane.
Yeah.
But when you go to a place like Texas, and there are many other states to choose from where there's freedom, you can grow your business without the government destroying it at every opportunity. You don't need endless permits to do anything. Mm-hmm. You can find like-minded people. You can actually become more independently, financially sustainable in an off-grid mode if you have a little bit of creativity, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I think it makes a big difference which state you reside in, which country you reside in, and then which state you reside in. I think it makes a big difference that everyone has guns in the U.S. as well. I think it's, even though the guns don't need to be presented, it's just an understanding that the authorities have and that these manipulators and shadow elite have. But when it comes to whether you're in California or New York compared to Texas or Florida or South Dakota, it's just night and day. And we met at the Nullify Now thing, and I used to think that the whole 10th Amendment thing was kind of a joke, and really there's a strong central government that just runs it all. But after COVID, it really exposed that there actually is some semblance of federalism in this country.
Right.
And there's folks that were really pushing back and bucking the system. And then for people that live in California or New Jersey to see, like, well, why the heck can they keep their business? I had to shut down my business. I'm living in poverty now because of this. And they're like, maybe there's something that's not right here.
Well, this is why so many people move to Florida from Connecticut, New Jersey, New York. And DeSantis has sort of demonstrated what you're talking about, that when a state is willing to stand up and fight back, and it's not just, the governor, it's also the attorney general of the state. We have a pretty fierce AG here in Texas, by the way, fighting on a lot of issues. States can really draw a line in the sand and say, we're not going to take that anymore.
Yeah, and that's what's happened. Texas is a great place to be. There's a lot of space. If Texas were to secede, Texas would be able to survive financially. There's deep water ports, there's oil. And one thing that I think is really important is just the culture of the people.
Yeah.
There's rugged individualism, there's Southern gentlemen, there's my good friend Ernie Hancock, he would always say there's two types of people in this world. Those that want to be left alone and those that just won't leave you alone. And here in Texas, there's a lot of the former.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. That's right. No, I've had the same experience living in Texas, is why it just fits perfectly. I grew up in the Midwest, and then I lived in Taiwan for a couple of years. I lived in Ecuador for a couple of years before moving to Texas. I was in other states as well. I lived in Arizona for a time, but Texas has everything, like you just said, but it's the culture too. And even, I'm a prepper. I think, would you count yourself as a prepper?
Sure.
Yeah. So in Texas, you can do things like buy a tractor, and it's not weird. You can have a 500-gallon diesel fuel tank, and it's not weird. Mm-hmm. You can have livestock, and it's not weird. I mean, a lot of places around the country, you start accumulating that kind of equipment, and people start losing their minds. It becomes very strange to them. So with everything that you've said here, John, I mean, I think you're opening people's eyes to a lot of really important things, but the real crux of what you're saying, and what I think you really demonstrate, is that it's time to start doing. Even if you don't know all the answers yet, just start with something. And that you are providing a framework through your summit, through your Freedom Cells, a framework for people to connect with others who are doing the things that need to get done for us to build a new system of sustainable liberty for humanity.
Yeah, for sure. In the work I do with Live Free Academy, I have a 4-part empowerment philosophy. And the first part is mindset. So you got to get out of your head. You got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in your fellow human beings that we could pull off some pretty cool things and create some solid freedom. I strongly believe where your attention goes, energy flows. So instead of focusing so much on all the tyranny and chaos and Klaus Schwab and this, that, and the other, focus on the garden in your backyard. Focus on the kids getting together with other kids and building these communities together, right? So mindset is foundational. You got to believe in yourself that you can get it done. Step out of victimhood and into empowerment. And the next piece is to come up with a strategy. How do we get from here to there? How do we get from here to there in our own lives? How can I become more food independent? How can I become more energy self-sufficient? How can I pull more of my money out of the stock market and into gold or land or cryptocurrency? Come up with a strategy. And then let's come up with a strategy as a community. How can we one day create an environment where we're able to declare independence and have a semblance of political autonomy? And then the next step is to find like-minded people to help you on your journey. So find a team, the Freedom Cell Network, communities, whatever it is, the local farmers market, go meet people there and invite them to have a beer or whatever. And the final piece is to take massive action. What it is that we're trying to do in our personal lives, but more importantly, collectively, have genuine freedom, to find some sovereignty in this world that we can pass on to future generations. It's going to take a lot of work. So sometimes people are going to have to shift up their priorities. Less time on Netflix, less time at happy hour, unless you're meeting with the like-minded guys, kind of getting there and get some relationship building. But more time building, more time growing, more time focused on your plan, more time executing your plan. So mindset, strategy, find a team, and take massive action. And we're putting together this event to help people do all of those things.
Indeed, you are. And if you don't mind me asking, as you're going through those, I was thinking about what stops people from doing those things. And I think it's typically fear, and it's a fear of the unknown. Like this is unknown to them, so it feels like uncharted territory. And then the second fear is fear of not fitting into their current social group, because they don't want to appear as, the weird one. But as you're saying, this isn't weird. This is entirely normal. This is the way humans lived forever. This is the normal, is to grow some of your own food. Right. What's abnormal is the artificial construct that's been created and people living in virtual worlds and not connecting.
Fake food, fake medicine, fake relationship, fake news.
Yep.
And, you can still maintain relationships with, some people call them normies. I don't like that term, though. It's kind of offensive to people, but whatever. We can say it internally. You can still have those relationships. Like there's a lot of people that I consult with and they're like, my significant other isn't going along with the plan. And I'm like, well, how important is the relationship? If you value the relationship, then maybe consider pulling back and spend the time with them, just enjoying life, going on hikes, watching a good movie every once in a while, right? But then you build your friend circle or your network and your community. And one thing that people need to realize is the more that you get out there and tap into these groups and these communities, you'll come to understand that there's a lot of us out there. We are by no means some small fringe minority group like Trudeau said about the truckers. Like there's a lot of us that get it, and more of us are coming out and getting network and getting organized. So you can always just find a brand new friend group that's ready and willing to talk shop with you and more importantly, to get stuff done.
Very true and well said. And I want to thank you, John, for all that you're doing and for also spending the time with me here in person today. It's much appreciated. I look forward to doing more with you in the future. I'm really excited about what you're doing. And I'm excited about the fact that you're sharing it with so many people. I mean, it's one thing to figure out all these cool systems on your own, but then to teach others or to inspire others, that's huge. And people are really needing some inspiration right now. So you're doing it. Thank you for what you're doing.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, absolutely. It's a pleasure to speak with you. And the website is exitandbuildlandsummit.com. And what are the dates again of the event?
May 13th through the 15th. It's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay. And then May 16th and 17th will be your sleep catch-up days, because you'll have no sleep for those 3 days since you're the event organizer.
It's a marathon for sure.
Yeah. But I wish you the best at the event, and I hope I can connect with some of your speakers as well. I'd love to talk with them and help share their knowledge as well. So thank you so much, John Bush, and best to you.
Thanks.
All right, for those of you who enjoyed this interview, feel free to share this freely on other platforms and other channels. I'm giving you permission right now. I'm sure John Bush doesn't mind either. We're all about sharing knowledge for humanity. And check out exitandbuildlandsummit.com. You're going to learn some amazing information there. And join us being the people who are learning how to live more free and grow more food and connect with others who are liberty-minded. I believe we are the future of human civilization. I truly believe that. We are the rebuilders. We are the ones who will be here. We are the ones with the solutions. Thank you for listening today. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon.com. Take care. Survival Nutrition is our new free audiobook that you can download right now from survivalnutrition.com. In this nearly 8-hour audiobook, you will learn life-saving secrets of how to use food, nutrients, plant molecules, trace minerals, and chemical compounds to save your life, even in a total collapse scenario. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, and I'm the author of Survival Nutrition. I founded and run a multi-million-dollar food science laboratory, and I'm the author of the best-selling science book, Food Forensics. I'm also a prepper, a patriot, and a survivalist. I can teach you how to survive what's coming by growing your own food, medicine, and antibiotics that can help keep you healthy and alive even during the worst of times. At survivalnutrition.com, you'll be able to instantly download the full free audiobook as MP3 files. Keep a copy of all these files on your local hard drive and print out the full guide, just in case we lose the power grid. survivalnutrition.com.